here today for Lawnfawn, and for today's project I'm going to be making another birthday card, and I'm going to be combining a Trifold card with a little Peekaboo card. I just thought that would be super fun to do. So I'm going to be using the Lawnfawn Totally Awesome stamp set, as well as the Peekaboo backdrop dies as well that was just recently released. And so I'm going to start off by making my trifold design. So I just took two card bases that I cut from some watercolor cardstock. So these measures 8 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall, and then I scored them at 4 inches, and I just made 2 of those, and I'm going to adhere them together. So I just added some adhesive on one of the backs of the card base, adhered onto the other, and this creates my trifold design. So you can see here it opens on up. You could definitely do this if you had a 12-inch piece of cardstock, but I didn't have any 12-inch cardstock with watercolor paper, so that's why I decided to make 2 card bases just to make it a little easier. So I'm going to first work on distress inking this background for my trifold card. So this is why I wanted to use watercolor paper, just because I find blending on it a lot easier, and you won't get any harsh lines or anything like that. So for the front of the card, I decided I wanted to use some salty ocean and tumbled glass for sort of like the sky aspect, and then some mowed lawn and some twisted citron for the land aspect. So I didn't really want to go with the like traditional like land and sky sort of ink blending for this card, since obviously it's frogs, you're not going to have a typical scene like that. But for the very front of the card, I basically just wanted there to be like 2 colours blending into each other. So I felt like this was just the best way to go, but it's a little bit more realistic on the inside, I guess. So once I've gone ahead and ink blended over the top piece, I just place the negative mask over top of that, so then I can ink blend some mowed lawn and some twisted citron onto the bottom half of the cardstock and it not get all muddy with the blue. So once I've gone ahead and finished ink blending on there, I'm going to remove the masks and start die cutting. So I'm going to use the Peekaboo sort of pieces from the Peekaboo backdrop dies, and I'm just going to arrange them onto my card front, adhere them down with some washi tape, open up the card base the whole way, and then run it through my Big Shot machine. So once they run through the Big Shot machine, I can remove the dies, and you have 4 little Peekaboo panels on the front. And just be really careful removing whatever adhesive off distress ink, because I ended up actually ripping this front panel and had to redo it because the washi tape got a little bit too stuck. So there you can see all of the Peekaboo panels all die cut. Then I just sort of arranged some images of where I wanted them to go, and then ink blended on the second layer of the trifold accordingly. So I decided on the inside I wanted 3 different layers, because obviously my images are going to be placed like according to where the Peekaboo flaps are. So I really wanted there to be like each layer of distress ink blending according to where I wanted my images placed. So at the very top I decided to use some tumbled glass for the sky. Then I am placing down another mask and creating sort of like a pond, which I'm using salty ocean, peacock feathers, and cracked pistachio in the middle for. Then at the very bottom, I decided to do a brown layer just because I really wanted that to be where my log was going to be placed after I Copic coloured it in. So I really wanted some sort of like dirt or land for the log to sit on. Now that my background is completely ink blended, you can see there it looks really great from the Peekaboo aspect of the card, and now I'm going to go ahead and Copic colour in my images. So I am working from dark to light again, as I always do, just because I find it the easiest. So I'm going to start off with colouring in the lily pads. So I'm using G28 as my darkest, G09 as my mid-tone, and G03 as my lightest shade, and I'm just blending that all out. I did add some shading in the middle of the lily pad just because I figure that's where my frogs are going to sit, and it would look a little bit more realistic to have some shading underneath them. Now for my frogs, I'm using my favourite green combination. So I'm starting off with YG17 and just going in where I think the darkest areas would be. Then I'm going in with YG23 and I'm just blending that all out. And then for my lightest shade, I'm going in with YG21 and just blending all of those colors together. And I am making sure that I am going over the darkest area that I've already colored, just because it sort of blends out that color a little bit more nicer. And I just feel like you get a lot more of an even blend if you do it that way. So once I finished colouring in the frogs, I also coloured in the leaves on those little reeds the exact same way with the same green colour. Now I'm colouring in the log, so I'm starting off with E59 as my darkest, blending that out with E57 as my mid-tone, and then I'm blending that all together with E55, just making sure again I'm blending over all of the colour I previously coloured, just to get a really nice seamless blend. Once I've coloured in the log, it is time to work on the little bits of the reeds on the top. So I'm just using some YR24 as my darkest, YR21 as my mid-tone, and Y21 as my lightest. Then it's time to colour in the flowers that go on the lily pad, so I'm just using some ready pinks for that. So I'm using R24 as my darkest, R22 as my mid-tone, and then blending that all out with R21 as my lightest shade. Then I just added a little bit of B00 and B000 onto the dragonflies and used the coordinating dies to cut out all of my images. Now that all of my images are cut out, I can go ahead and adhere them onto my scene. So I've gone ahead and opened up all of the flaps, and then I'm going to adhere my images accordingly. So some of them I did, most of them I did with just flat adhesive because I feel like that worked a little better, but some of them I did pop up, especially the frogs, because I knew that they were going to pop out outside of the Peekaboo little windows, so there wouldn't be any weird overlapping. So I'm just going through and adhering down a few of the images. I went and adhered the largest frog on top of the log with one of the little reeds, I think they're called. Then I adhered a little frog on a lily pad with a flower on the left hand side to go through that Peekaboo window. I adhered the jumping frog at the top, so it seems like he's jumping from somewhere onto the log or onto the land into the top left hand Peekaboo window, and then I just added a little dragonfly onto the top right hand window. Now it's time to add an additional sentiment to my background. Since I had quite a big gap in this large Peekaboo window at the bottom here, I decided to just stamp Ribbit Ribbit in there to sort of fill in that gap a little bit. So those are all of my Peekaboo windows filled, and that's sort of like the second layer of my Peekaboo window trifold card done. And then I just need to use the rest of the images for the third layer. So I'm going to open it up entirely and then ink blend a little bit onto the third layer, which is the sort of main base, I guess, for the card where you would write your message. That's where I'm just going to do a little bit of ink blending at the bottom. I decided that I wanted to use a few more images that I had already coloured just to sort of continue on the trifold feel a little bit more. I really loved the thought of that, so I decided to add in a little bit more. I used some Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn at the bottom panel. I'm just doing a little bit. Then I'm using Gathered Twigs for this sort of second layer in here, and I'm just using one colour here because I didn't really feel the need to try and blend two. It was such a small area, and I'm also just reusing the masks that I had cut before for previous layers of the card. Once I've blended on a little bit of Gathered Twigs, I'm going to remove my mask and then completely sort of ink blend this background. So actually, originally I was going to ink blend the entire background, but I decided to just have it sort of fading into white since I thought that would look a little bit better, since I wanted to add an additional sentiment on the inside to go with the Happy Birthday sentiment on the outside. So I decided to just add a little bit of blue at the bottom for a little scene, then have the rest for writing space. So I'm using Salty Ocean and a little bit of Tumbled Glass for the bottom piece of this panel. Now that I have ink blended on the background, I just went ahead and dried that with a heat tool, and now I'm going to adhere my images into place. So I've got a couple lily pads left and a couple of reeds and flowers left. I think I've also got a dragonfly, so I'm just going to add those pieces in just to complete the scene entirely. I didn't have any frogs left. I could have coloured a frog, but I sort of feel like that jumping frog maybe jumped from the middle of the card to the second layer of the card as sort of a continuation. I thought that would be sort of super cute. So now that all of my scene is all adhered and all ready to go, it's time to work on the sentiment. So I'm using the Happy Birthday sentiment just for the front, just a super simple sentiment that I'm going to continue onto the inside of the card. So I'm inking this up with Versamark ink and stamping this down onto a thin strip of black cardstock. Then I'm going to use some white embossing powder to emboss this. I did stamp it twice just in case I messed one up. I quite often do, so I like to do that. So now I'm just heat setting the white powder and I'm going to cut it down into a little rectangular strip just to make it easier to adhere. You could do fishtail banners or anything like that, but I really just wanted to keep it super simple. So once those are all done, I'm just going to pop those up with some more foam tape and then onto the panel of my card. I originally really wanted it on the top right hand corner of the card, between those two flaps, but because the bottom flap lifted up, I didn't feel like it didn't work too well, so I decided to put it on the bottom left hand corner in that little gap. So that is the front of the card all completed. Then there's the middle layer of the card and then the final layer of the card. And for this final layer, I'm just going to add an additional sentiment since I feel it's quite fitting, like because I have a design technically on the inside of my card, I felt like adding an additional sentiment was really worth it and really finished it off quite nicely. So on the front it says Happy Birthday, then you open up all the flaps and you can see all of the little frogs on the inside. Then you open it up and see the full design on the inside or the middle layer of the card. And then on the final layer you see the very final scene which says have a totally awesome day. Super duper cute. I absolutely love how this turned out. You could, change this up for any occasion, any critters, any style. It's just super fun. I love these little peekaboo windows. They make a card so super cute. So here is one final look at the card with the front layer of the trifold, the middle layer of the trifold, and the final base layer of the trifold. A really super fun design. So that finishes up my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed and were inspired. All of the supplies will be listed down below and also over at the blog. And I will catch you all next time. Thank you so much for watching today.